Chairman, thank you, Senator Menendez, as well. You were gracious enough to allow me to read that statement. I have prepared remarks. They've been submitted for the record. I will save a couple minutes here this morning. A couple of other items that I want to mention off the top, things that have happened recently that I think are important to our diplomatic efforts around the world, that I want to share with you and explain to you. And then I want to spend a couple minutes. You asked Senator Corker about what I've tried to do in my first now 3 weeks or 3.5 weeks to get the team back on the field. And I'm happy to share both what we've done and what I have in the queue and how I'm thinking about that problem set now that I've had a chance to get on board and see a little bit more of the challenge that's in front of me. First, you would have seen in the last 48 hours that we had 2 officers declared persona non grata in Venezuela. We have responded reciprocally by expelling 2 senior Venezuelan officials from the United States. We are deeply worried about what's taking place as a result of the sham election that occurred on Sunday, the 20th, where we're doing all the right things. We have an American there that we desperately want to get back, Joshua Holt, and so know that we are engaged. We were disappointed that the Maduro regime kicked our folks out, although frankly not surprised. We've been trying to do the good work that diplomacy brings to a country like that is occupied by the great people of Venezuela, and Maduro found that unacceptable. Second, also in the last 48 hours, we notified our workforce in China about a medical incident that took place there in Guangzhou. We had an officer who suffered a medical incident that is consistent with what we had happen to American officers that were serving in Havana. We informed the Chinese government about that. They said all the right things and have demonstrated their willingness to help us identify the vector which led to this medical incident. We have medical teams heading there. We have all the appropriate folks heading to help all of the officers, American officers serving there in China, and doing the things we can to mitigate the risk that we have another incident like this there, or frankly, for that matter, any place else in the world. And then thirdly, my first 3.5 weeks, we have taken steps to allow our team to go effectively conduct their jobs. Two actual announcements. We allowed the team to hire family members, a very ready source of very capable officers to serve alongside my current colleagues. We think that will help our families a great deal. And then the hiring freeze itself was lifted. Senator Menendez, you said some of the bureaus aren't hiring. We still have a little bit of guidance that needs to be issued, but most of that is now out. We have end strength goals. We have a plan for how we'll do that in a thoughtful way so that resources are expended appropriately, but know that it is now the case that where there are demand signals, we need additional talent. The State Department employees are empowered to bring those additional team members on board. The third piece is I have spent a fair amount of my time personally and have big teams working to get America's senior officials on board. There are still big gaps at the assistant secretary level, at the undersecretary level. Where there were nominees, we're pushing to make sure they move quickly, and where there weren't, we're working to develop nominees to come across so that we can, in fact, engage all over the world, sharing American ideals and values in the way that the State Department has done historically well. And I look forward to being the leader of the organization that's back on the playing field, leading America's diplomacy abroad. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back.
Thank you, and I'm going to yield for a moment, and we'll interject along the way and turn to Senator Menendez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Secretary, thank you for the insights of the most recent things. Let me start with North Korea, understanding that the summit isn't going forward at this point, but hopefully at some point there will be an opportunity to seek the appropriate type of meetings necessary to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. But since I've heard different statements coming out of the administration, I want to see if we can go through a sense of what it is that we might mutually agree is the essence of the elements that are essential to any deal with North Korea. So I'm going to ask you to give me a sense of yes or no on some of these questions. Do you believe that the current nuclear test suspension must continue, and that denuclearization means the dismantlement and removal of all nuclear weapons facilities, technology, and material from North Korea?
There are two questions there. The second one is with respect to dismantlement. I think the answer to that is yes. We are looking for the complete dismantlement of their weapon systems, the delivery capability associated with that, and all of the elements of their program that would lead them to have material, enriched material, fissile material that could be used at some time to build out a weapon system.
So,
So I think the answer to that is yes, but I wanted to make sure I clarified.
okay, I appreciate that. Do you believe that any deal must include an agreement that North Korea must end the production and enrichment of uranium and plutonium for military programs?
Yes, but as we begin to head down this path, I have to tell you, I've had discussions with Chairman Kim personally. There have been other discussions. I am going to reserve some space for us to be able to conduct these discussions outside of the public sphere. I think that's important. I think it's important for our eventual ability to achieve the outcomes that I think everyone in this room hopes we can achieve.
Well, I certainly want to give you negotiating space, but I at least want to understand, as a committee responsible for oversight, what is our standards that we're going into? That's what I'm trying to determine. What's the standards?
No, sir, I think we've made very clear what our objectives are.
Okay, so let me ask you then further, would a deal have to include an agreement that North Korea must permanently dismantle and disable its nuclear weapons infrastructure, including test sites, all nuclear weapons research and development facilities, particularly with respect to advanced centrifuges and nuclear weapons enrichment and reprocessing facilities?
That is certainly our objective, Senator.
Would any deal have to include agreement that North Korea put forward a full, complete, and verifiable declaration of all its nuclear activities?
Yes, I only wish the Iranians had done so.
Would any deal include robust restrictions to assure that nuclear material technology and expertise are not exported?
Sir, we have a deep aim, wholly apart from denuclearization of the North Korean peninsula, and a lot of work underway to ensure that proliferation does not occur.
Does any deal have to include an agreement that North Korea continue its current ballistic missile test suspension, including any space launches, and that any agreement must include the dismantlement of all ballistic missiles and a prohibition on all ballistic missile development?
So I think I said this in my confirmation hearing. I'm happy to reiterate it. It is the case that is our objective, and I shared this with Chairman Kim when I met with him as well, that the missile program is a central component of their capacity to hold America at risk, and that is our aim, that is part of this agreement that we would reach, that they would no longer possess the capacity to achieve those kinds of launches that I think you're speaking to in your question.
And to be truly, completely verifiable and irreversible, any agreement with North Korea should be permanent in nature with no sunsets on its provisions?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, those are all very helpful for understanding the standards of what we're trying to achieve. Let me ask you, so as we walk away from the summit, where does that put us with the rest of the world? Do you believe that somehow we are strengthened in this regard, or are we weakened as a result of walking away ourselves because of some statements?
Senator, I don't believe in that sense that we're in a position to believe that there could be a successful outcome. I think that's what the president communicated pretty clearly in his letter. I can add to that. Over the past many days, we have endeavored to do what Chairman Kim and I had agreed, was to put preparation teams together to begin to work to prepare for the summit, and we had received no response to our inquiries from them. So we, in addition to what the president laid out in his letter, it is also the case that I disagree with what you said in your opening statement. I think the American team's fully prepared. I think we're rocking. I think we're ready. I think we're prepared for this meeting. I think President Trump's prepared for this meeting. We were fully engaged over the past weeks to prepare for this meeting. So I disagree with your assessment that the Americans are not ready.
Well, when I say not ready, I'm talking about, we needed to test all of the propositions and lay out all of the elements of what was
Yes, sir.
ultimately to be decided in a way to find out whether the North Koreans were truly true. But I gather.
Yes,
you
sir. That's
disagree
been
with me on
done.
that
That's been
regard.
done 3 times before in American history, and Kim Jong-un today possesses the most robust nuclear program he has ever had.
And as a result of canceling the summit, he still possesses them. Let me ask you this. In your confirmation hearing, you noted that Russian bad behavior is the driver behind the currently acrimonious bilateral relationship, and this behavior presents a clear danger to the United States. We've seen a whole host of actions, decisions, undisputed findings of the intelligence community. We saw Russia deploy a chemical weapons attack on the soil of a NATO ally. We saw a chemical attack that Russia supported by Assad. Can you tell me why it is that the president seems unable to speak of Russia in a way that acknowledges that there was an attack against our own country in terms of a cyber attack on our elections, and actions that we've noted others that were acted this way, that were put as a terrorist state, and yet we see no such actions as it relates to Russia. I'm trying to understand the administration's views on Russia.
Senator, you just said that there have been no actions. I fundamentally disagree with that. I'm happy I brought a list of the actions this administration has taken to push back against Russian aggression of all forms. Their cyber efforts, their election meddling efforts, the chemical attack that took place in Skripal. The list is long. I think the record ought to properly reflect that it is far more than took place under the previous administration. Indeed, most of this meddling took place during the previous administration, and this administration is now working to deter that from ever happening again. And I think our administration ought to be very proud of the work we have taken, sanctions and otherwise, against Russia.
I'll be happy to explore that with you in a second.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thanks for your service. In your answers to to Senator Menendez's questions, you sure seem to make clear what your definition of dismantlement really means. You said you made it also clear to Chairman Kim Jong-un. Did you?
Did I make it clear to him?
Yeah, I mean,
Yes, sir.
how clear? How many times did you repeat it?
Sir, I spoke in English. There was a translator, but our team confirmed that the translator said what I said. I don't know. I had 2 meetings, maybe 3 hours plus total. Enough that I understood him to have understood what it was I was saying. Indeed, put aside what I said, when I heard back from him,
That's what I wanted to ask.
when I heard back from him, there was little doubt in my mind that he understood the scope of what it was we were asking for, the nature of what would have to take place, the verification that we would need to undertake in order to be comfortable that we could begin to deliver the assurances that he in return asked for. And so I think we were having a real conversation where there was real understanding between the two of us. It's what caused me to recommend to the president that I thought the time would in fact permit us to have a real opportunity to do something historic. I'm still optimistic that we will reach that point. I know the president is as well.
So you have no doubt that you made it crystal clear and he fully understands exactly what dismantlement means in terms of these negotiations.
To the best of my ability, Senator.
So he understood it. Did he have any reaction whatsoever?
Yes. And while I have...
Did he resist it? Did he seem welcoming to it? I mean, what was his, as best you can determine through translators, what was his reaction to what really was table stakes?
He was unsurprised. There would be no surprise what Secretary Pompeo's brief was going to be when he walked into that room. We'd made this abundantly clear through multiple channels over months of this administration. So there was no surprise. It was the conversation revolved around how it is we would achieve that, what the mechanisms might be to begin to achieve that, and how the United States would demonstrate in return that we were committed to the assurances that we were prepared to provide to him.
So you'd say he basically accepted those terms of a negotiation, that what he knew the U.S. side would be pressing for was that your definition of dismantlement.
Yes, Senator. I don't know how. Yes, I believe that's right. I don't know how you would read the administration statements over the past months and then have the Secretary of State walk in and repeat them and not at least understand. Be careful. Yes. I think the answer is yes.
Okay, so with that understanding, he still released 3 hostages.
Yes, that's correct. And agreed to have a summit on June 12th as well. And agreed to send teams to prepare for the June 12th meeting between the two leaders
So
as
the
well.
point I'm trying to make is the administration has been crystal clear, completely consistent. The result of your meeting was still the release of 3 hostages. So what's changed here is Kim Jong-un's approach to this thing, correct? Very, very disappointingly so.
I regret the statements that the North Koreans have made over the past few days, and the fact that we've not been able to conduct the preparation between our two teams that would be necessary to have a chance for a successful summit.
Do you believe the chairman also believed President Trump's offer of assistance in return for that complete dismantlement? Do you think he had any doubt of that as well?
Senator, my wife always reminds me I should be careful about knowing what's in someone else's mind.
Mine too.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get your understanding of how those talks.
Yes, I communicated very clearly that this was a sincere commitment on behalf of the President of the United States, that we were prepared to make that transaction happen in a way that would allow his regime to have the assurances it needed in order to make this fundamental strategic shift in the history of in the North Korean trajectory, to make this fundamental shift where for decades it has been that these nuclear weapons were the thing that provided them security, and to convince him that in fact his security was best assured by going through this process and working with the United States to achieve that.
So what conversations now have you had with the Chinese officials on this topic? Are you convinced that they are going to continue to cooperate and maintain those sanctions, which is the only thing that is going to bring Kim Jong-un to that negotiating table in good faith to actually agree to dismantlement in exchange for all the benefits to his economy and his people?
I met with the Chinese foreign minister yesterday afternoon. He assured me that they would continue to abide by all the UN Security Council resolutions relating to this, and that they understood that those needed to remain in place, not till June 12th. At this point, we were talking about in the context there being a summit on June 12th, but not only through June 12th, but until such time as we achieved what it was the Americans believed. And I think, frankly, that China agrees would be the outcome that is best for the world and the best for North Korea as well.
Are you getting any hints that there's any relaxation of those sanctions, more goods crossing between the border, between China and North Korea?
Senator, we haven't seen anything to suggest they've violated the Security Council resolutions in a substantial way. I worry about everyone. The global pressure campaign that is put in place is important and needs to continue. Perhaps even this morning more than yesterday. That's very important so that we can ultimately get to the right place here.
What gave me some measure of optimism is, from my standpoint, I think it's entirely in China's best interest to achieve exactly what the administration is demanding here.
Senator, that's what their foreign minister told me yesterday as well, unambiguously believes that. He told me that China believes that the denuclearization of North Korea is in China's best interest.
Well, let me just say, I support President Trump's letter. I think it's an excellent letter. We need to make sure that Kim Jong-un understands that we are completely consistent. We will absolutely demand that, and that all the benefits that can flow to North Korea will not occur until we achieve our definition that he is well aware of, crystal clear, of complete dismantlement. So again, thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Senator Cardin.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I would ask consent that statements from Refugees International and Catholic Relief Services be made part of our record.
Without objection.